OneLitPodcast may contain adult language or sensitive subject matter. Please take care while listening.
Hello, everyone. It's Andria.
Hayden.
And Olivia.
And welcome to OneLitPodcast.
Woo!
We are back to discuss chapters 10 through 18 of Abigail Rosemarie's The Moonflowers. And wow, a lot happens in these chapters.
Yes.
Yep.
But before we get into it, how is everybody?
Good.
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 Not depressed at all for reading these chapters.
It was a little depressing, but
I'll admit I cried a little.
Really?
Yes, not gonna lie.
Wow.
Yeah, whatever.
I didn't cry, but that's so good that it was able to make you cry.
I know.
I did not.
And we're gonna go into it more later, but this book is a lot about just like women and everything.
Struggles.
So I just kind of feel like as a woman, it's kind of like it hits harder.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if you feel the same way.
Oh, yeah.
Andrea.
I mean, I definitely felt heavy.
Yeah.
I am curious what part specifically triggered that for you.
Oh, we'll talk about it. I mean, I didn't like full out
Just
tears or anything, but I was definitely just my eyes were getting a little. Someone was chopping an onion right next to me or something. There was a little bit. Yeah.
I can assume what part it is that I think probably did that for you, but
we'll get to it.
We'll get to that.
So what did we bring to drink this evening?
So Hayden and I, by pure coincidence, got the same thing this week. So we got the Menage a Trois, which you got one a couple weeks ago.
And it was good.
Different. But this week we are doing one called Limelight.
Pinot Grigio,
supposed to be zesty key lime, mouthwatering green apple flavors.
I was looking for a white wine, something a little lighter, a little bit of sweetness to it. And this one just stood out to me. Me and Andrea just went to the store and happened to see it and thought it looked good. We just went to the store like an hour ago.
Yeah. So I am drinking, I'm going to butcher this, by the way, an Adesso Romana Cagnina Dolce, which is it's a red wine.
A sweet red.
Yeah. It's really good.
It's probably like a red blend, I'm assuming.
Yeah. It is really good. It is really sweet. But yum. Okay. Are we ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So grab yourself a drink, snuggle up in a cozy corner, and get ready to get lit. Okay. I'm going to start off with a trigger warning. This whole episode will have mentions of rape, sexual assault, graphic depictions of self-induced abortions, and domestic violence.
Yes.
So please, if you cannot handle any of these subjects, please turn this episode off now. Okay. Let's get into it. So when we left off, Eloise told us things were going to change. And boy, did they. So we start off with Eloise and Ben in the woods, and they're hunting squirrels with a slingshot. Ben is just yapping, and she's trying to get him to be quiet so they don't scare off the squirrels. She does find one, but she misses. And Ben's like, well, you must need more practice. And Eloise is like, well, I must need to leave you at home. So they're having fun, being sassy to each other. Well, things take a turn when Eloise hears a small cry in the woods, which then turns into this primal, guttural cry. And Ben takes Eloise by the hand, and they follow the sound, and they find a pregnant woman in tremendous pain. She's in labor. Eloise is about to run home and get Alma, but Ben, just being a young boy, is able to scoop this woman up, and they carry her all the way back to Whitmore Hall.
Somehow,
he's really strong.
Yeah.
13-year-old boy lifting a full-grown pregnant woman.
I didn't know if it said what age he actually was, so I was like,
it doesn't say.
Yeah,
so it kind of confuses me. But she says he's young, and she is surprised that he's able to do it.
I was thinking he was like 12, 13.
I'm thinking they're like preteens.
I think it does mention something about either
Later,
her.
I thought he was 13. Yeah.
It mentioned something about either her or him being 11.
Mhm.
So,
Hmm.
yeah, so they're
If he's 11,
pretty
holy
young.
cow. Holy cow.
So we get to the hall and we find out it's Margaret Owens. And we've heard that name before. By the time Eloise and Alma have done several births, but something is going wrong here. We find out that Margaret's placenta has abrupted, and she's only 20 weeks along. So the baby will be too premature and it will not survive. Alma tells them if they don't do something, neither of them will make it.
Yes.
So Ben is freaking out. He's covered in blood, but Alma's asking him to get behind Margaret to hoist her up by the shoulders so her and Eloise can work on her.
And she's gushing blood.
Yeah, well, they put some herbs on her, like, stomach and her vagina, and I guess it, like, pulls the baby out somehow. So the baby comes quick, the blood comes quick, and it's a mess. And that baby comes out, it's like covered in bruises, and Eloise knows it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And there's this crazy thing, because we find out that, well, she says they knew Margaret because she worked at this diner.
Mm-hmm.
And it says in here, Eloise knows, Margaret's fine. Alma drops her off at home. Next day, she goes works her shift at the pancake house.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, because it says, like, her husband is, like, an invalid
mhm.
and everything. So, yeah, like, she doesn't have a
he's
choice.
collecting workers' comp.
Yeah, like, she doesn't really have a choice but to, like, kind of go back and, like, work, like, for them and everything.
It's just crazy and a testament to what women go through.
Mhm.
Like, this traumatic thing. And she's like, I gotta go back to work next week.
Go back to work.
So, it's crazy. So Ben is off in the corner after this. He's traumatized.
Throws up.
He throws up. Eloise is about to give him a napkin, but he runs out. She finds him outside. They're in their little oak rocket. And Eloise tells him, it's not usually like that. This was an emergency, and we did all we could. And Ben just says, "This is the first time I've ever been in your house." And Eloise goes, "Well, you never asked." But then his tone completely changes, and he starts to get accusatory, basically saying the town was right about her and Alma. And she says it was right then Eloise felt something between her and Benjamin rot. So she feels this relationship is inevitably, it's irreparably changed.
For some reason, it seems like he kind of feels that
They
did
killed her.
caused the baby
Killed
to
the baby,
die.
yeah. So yeah, he says he should have taken her to
The
the doctor. We could have maybe saved the baby. But Eloise is like, well, we saved mom. Like, we saved a life today.
Yeah.
It could have been both of them. It could have been neither. Then he starts to imply that I could tell my dad.
Yeah.
And have them shut the operation down. And then there's this weird little thing where Eloise asks him, how would he do that? And Ben just like slowly puts a little gun with his hand
Like a
up
finger
to his
gun.
head and just shoots.
Yeah.
And then he laughed.
Like, okay.
I'm like, that's creepy.
And my whole argument, because, whenever he says we could have taken her, like, to the regular doctor in
Mhm.
town. Well, Eloise is like, well, she wouldn't have, like, survived. Like,
Yeah.
Like, by the time we
The
got her
travel.
there, like, she would have died. And I was like, well, there was a reason that you found her in the woods
Right.
instead
was
of
she
on
in
her
the
way to
woods?
town. Because she was coming, like, to their place, I think.
You think so?
I think she was on her, like...
Because obviously she'd been out there for a while. She was pale.
Well, yeah, like, she was at home. She was like, oh my gosh, something is happening. I need to get there quick. Like, she's, like, on her way, like, to their house whenever she just, like, I mean, she's like hurting and everything. Like she just couldn't make it, so she just collapsed and everything. Because it said like it looked like she had been like running.
Yeah.
Like she was so like disheveled and just like she wasn't even like dressed for the cold and everything. She knew that something was wrong, panicked. She was like, I need to get to like Ulma.
So I think it's part of the author's choice to show a woman like that desperately running to save a child.
Oh yeah.
Instead of like, because all the town people think they just did abortions and everything.
Yeah,
there are people coming to them to help save their children.
I was thinking maybe she was running through the woods so that no one would see her instead of taking the road. I just found it
That could
strange
be
that she was
too, because it was during the day.
Yeah.
I just found it strange that she was actually in the woods
Yeah, that's true.
instead of taking the road up.
It said a lot of people that like came to them came at night.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that might be a reason why she was actually like in the woods.
Right.
Instead of from the opposite direction. But yeah, I feel like that's kind of a testament to like how the regular doctors are. It's just like they might not have actually saved her, where it's just like, because I mean, you know, like she's kind of like providing for her family right now.
Mm-hmm.
If she had gone to the regular doctor, possibly have died there, like now her husband is just like out of luck.
Yeah.
Basically, with like no one. And also there's like not the possibility of having a child now.
Yeah.
If she's gone.
Right.
So after this moment...
Yeah. So Eloise knows that he's actually not going to tell his dad what exactly happened here. He actually goes on to make up a story that he went hunting. But do you have something to add to this part before we go back to Tig in the present?
No, not necessarily. I was going to say, after we have this moment with them where they're in this oak rocket, then we jump back to present time with Tig.
Right. So back in the present with Tig, we're back at Maze. And Tig is just sitting in her, like, they're just trying to digest everything that Eloise just told her. And she hears the chime of a grandfather clock. And just something pulls her to this clock. And she knows how to, like, look for the creator because of her dad being, like, into antiques and everything. So she opens it up and finds it was made by Dunn Furnishings in 1948, as in like her grandmother Valerie Dunn. So the next day she searches furniture stores in the phone book and she can only find one called Van's Furniture. So she goes to the furniture store, which is just an old barn, and she's looking around at all this beautiful handmade furniture. A woman walks in. She's like, well, how can I help you? Tig just explains everything about herself, who she is, what she's doing here, because she's not saying anything back. And we find out, because she goes, well, Dunn Furniture, that's not really a thing. It was just like a family kind of joke. Like if we made it, we wrote Dunn's Furniture on it. And so we find out that her name is Rita, and she is Rita Dunn, Valerie's sister. So Tig had no idea that her grandmother had a sister. And we find out when Valerie up and vanished, she didn't even tell her sister. And Tig goes like, do you know why you think she would leave? And Rita just says, death changes things for people. It's hard to stay in a place that is consumed with grief. And this is where we find out like why she was grieving. So Rita admits that she hardly saw Valerie once she got married to Benjamin Costello, even though they lived close by, especially after their baby was born. She says Val was in a bad way and then the baby died. So, we'll find out more about that later. And at this point, Rita doesn't know what killed the baby. So Tig then goes to ask about, well, what do you think about Benjamin? She says, well, he was a charmer. And basically, Valerie was destined to marry Ben because she was the eldest child of the great-great-grandfather that founded the town.
Oh, yeah. They're descended from the guy who, like, actually founded the town, the Dunns.
So her marrying the mayor is just, like, set in stone.
Yeah, she said Valerie always wanted to marry Ben.
Yeah. But Rita was also like, she didn't really know any other alternative. Because all the expectations were on her.
Yeah.
So Valerie said she always wanted to marry Ben. Valerie thought she knew Ben the most. But things changed when they got married.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a nice quote from Tig's dad. It says, "A person will rarely reveal who they truly are. You must always be ready for that rare glimpse of a person when their true self is revealed, where the light shifts and for an instant you see a person vulnerable and exposed." Rita does say she saw Valerie one time when she was married to Ben, and it was when she popped into a hardware store where she worked at. And she looked terrible, thin, hollow, just a shell of herself. And she stares at Rita and puts a finger against her lips, which at the time, Rita thought she was blowing her a kiss. But later, when she would think about it, she wondered if she was shushing her to keep quiet.
We find out later what exactly was happening.
Yeah. Don't tell anyone I was here.
Yeah. Okay. In chapter 12, Eloise tells Tig about the Dunn sisters. So Valerie and Rita were known as the town darlings. Valerie was brought up to be this proper, pious young lady, while Rita, since she was the youngest, she had a little bit more freedom to be a little wild child. So Eloise just thought they were like holier than thou, innocent. But one day, they show up on the steps of Whitmore Halls. When they show up, Eloise is actually downstairs skinning a rabbit and collecting its blood for medicinal purposes. When she hears the knock at the door, she answers it, and she has the dead rabbit sitting on her arm, which freaks Valerie out. So, Eloise opens the door, asks if their daddy knows they're here. Valerie's like, no, of course not. And he's like, all right, well, come in. And Eloise is just trying to talk to her, pry for some information, hoping it's a juicy tidbit, like Valerie has a wart or something that needs to come off, because she's annoyed. One, because of how pious and perfect she thinks she is. And she's particularly annoyed because one day she was supposed to go fishing with Ben, and Ben ditches her to go hang out with Valerie and have a picnic. So they call Alma in. Alma's totally different. She's kind and caring. And, she's like, what can I help you with? And Valerie says she needs a medication for termination. Alma asks if she's pregnant, but she says, no, it's for my sister.
Obviously, something happened with Rita.
Yes. So, and her sister is estimated to be 10 weeks pregnant, and she's 14 years old.
Yes. Which it doesn't ever say who did
the
it.
father was, yeah.
Yeah. So, I put a note in here. I was like, so who did it? When did this happen? And they don't even ask.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know.
Well, I mean, they're trying to be professional too, but I would totally want to know.
If he's 14, I'd be like, well, who did this to you?
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Yeah, it never does say.
Yeah.
Plus, I don't know in Kentucky back then what was the age of consent.
I don't know.
Probably 14.
It was really young.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's still 6. I'm pretty sure it's 16.
I think it's probably 16 or 17 now, but it was really young for a long time.
It was probably like 14.
I think they could start marrying you off at 14.
I mean, I feel like this was kind of like a consensual situation, but then it resulted in pregnancy that she didn't want.
Yeah, which, man, geez. Consensual at 14.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
I don't know.
She was a wild child and everything.
I guess. So Alma tells Eloise, start brewing that tea. And she takes Rita back for a physical exam.
In 1880, the age of consent in Kentucky was 12.
Oh, shoot. Well, this isn't 1880. This is what, 19?
It is, but I'm sure it didn't go up within that time.
Woo!
And if it did, it probably was 14. The current age of consent in Kentucky is 16.
Ugh.
Which is still too young.
That's still too young, yeah. She's giving her the physical exam, and it says, when Alma was sure, she would ask the girl again whether she was certain about termination. She would watch the girl's body language, the way her shoulders tensed and her fingers shook. She would ask whether anyone in her life was pressuring her to terminate, whether this decision was really her own. If Alma sensed any wavering in the girl's words, in her decision, she would tell her to get dressed, to go back down the hill, to come back when she had fully decided.
Which Valerie does say, she's barely 14, this never should have happened.
Mm-hmm.
Which kind of leads me to believe that it was not consensual. I
have no idea.
We don't know.
We don't know, yeah.
I wonder if we'll find that out later, but
yeah, I do like the quote that you just mentioned because, yeah, there's a lot of talk about, like, oh, they, like, just perform abortions up there. But, like, she makes, like, absolutely
sure. You want to do this.
That you want to do this.
You're not
going to
keep the
regret
baby.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, because she even asked her, she's like, are you sure you want to terminate this? You don't want to keep the child? And Eloise is like, she's a child herself.
Yeah.
So how is she going to care for one?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. So when that's done and Rita and Alma come back into the room, Valerie just tells them a story.
This is where I cried.
Yes, where she cried. Valerie says 2 years ago, they visited a friend for the summer who had an older sister.
Okay, yeah, I do know this part.
One night when the parents weren't home, the older sister revealed she was pregnant and needed to terminate. She'd found a knitting needle, and she thought that'd be fine because a friend of hers had done the same. So they do that, but things go terribly wrong, and she bleeds out. And Valerie and her friend are just trying to clean her up the best they can, but the parents come home and they find their daughter dead. And they made them promise not to tell anyone what happened.
Which they say it wasn't hours later till they realized that she was dead.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, in fear, that's why they came and asked for this medicinal abortion.
Didn't want that to happen to Rita.
Yeah.
Right. So, Alma gives Rita the instructions, tells her to expect heavy bleeding for several days, and hands her the tea. And she drank the tea greedily.
Mm-hmm.
So she definitely, there's no doubt, she definitely wants this to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So then they go home.
Yeah. I think just the reason I cried about that was just the fact that, like, abortion is so, like, taboo and, like, it wasn't legal, which led to stuff like that happening. Just, like, young girls and everything, like, they're at the end of their rope. They have nowhere to turn.
Mm-hmm.
Like, sex before marriage has always been such a taboo thing, and it's just like, I can't go, like, I can't talk to anyone about this. Like, it's either face the consequences of my actions, like, to my, like, peers and everything,
Mm-hmm.
which, I mean, back then it would probably be the same as, like, getting shunned
Yeah.
and everything, or try this, which has worked for some people, but not in this instance.
I will say this was a sad moment, but I honestly thought the next chapter was sadder.
Okay. Yeah, that is pretty sad too.
It was all sad.
Yeah. So,
I was thinking,
part specifically maybe.
I was thinking it was the next chapter that made you cry because I found it the saddest overall.
it's very sad.
I was sad
So-
for a couple chapters.
Yeah, big sad.
Back to the present. Tig receives a package. And then she decides to tell May that she was right. Eloise does know a lot of stuff to tell her. And May says she regrets telling Tig to go talk to her, saying some stories are better left untold. And in the package is a journal. And when she opens it, a moonflower falls out.
Which that response from May almost makes...
She's suspicious.
She has to have a story.
Oh, I'm sure we'll find
She's like,
something out about her.
It's better left unsaid. And I was like, is there a possible, like, abortion or, like, an assault in your past?
Probably.
that we're gonna hear?
Probably.
Because she seems really defensive.
Which, I mean,
she did bring up stuff.
She did say that her husband was an alcoholic.
That's true.
So maybe that comes back. Okay. So we're in chapter 13, and this is when Tig starts reading the journal. So we said earlier we were surprised because we found out that Valerie had been pregnant before Tig's dad.
Mm-hmm.
And so we find out that Valerie had a son named Davy. So in this journal, she just talks about the hardships here. So she gives birth to Davy, and he just cries and cries, and she can't get him to latch, so he's not eating. They do everything. They even try to like pump and bottle feed it. That doesn't work. And Benjamin is in the background, not helping situations. He has a temper.
Mm-hmm.
He's gone.
He's slamming doors. Yeah. Oh, and there's this weird quote. Hold on. I saw this earlier and I want to see what you think about it. So it says, Benjamin slams the door and the windows rattle like the teeth in the jar in my grandmother's bedroom. Not all are hers.
Oh, yeah.
So
I remember reading that. I was like, what?
Does she collect teeth?
I guess.
I just I read that. I was like, what? And then I just passed it over. I was like, I don't know.
Grandmother's collecting teeth.
Grandmother's collection of teeth. I mean,
which I know parents collect teeth.
I was gonna say that,
like their first baby teeth. So I don't know if that's what this is about.
Not all of them hers,
but she's got her own in there. So, unless it's like been passed down.
Passed down.
Like her baby teeth are in there. I don't know. Some people collect the baby teeth.
Generations worth
Generational
of
baby
teeth. Ew.
So that was just a weird part.
That's
here.
something I don't want passed down to me. No thanks.
Okay, so we keep going. She details how exhausted she is because the baby just cries and cries, and the baby's still not latching.
She's not producing. Baby's not latching.
She's not producing. And we find out Ben has disappeared for days.
Yeah.
She says either he's drinking at a bar or he's with women. And so one night she's rocking the baby and he just puts his thumb in his mouth, falls asleep, and passes away. And now that he's gone, her milk is coming.
Mm-hmm.
Which, in here it says his feet are so blue. Like, Jesus Christ. You should know. That isn't, I mean, it's so messed up to me.
Yeah. So
it's almost like she wouldn't let anybody near him.
Right.
Because it said that, like, her mom would come and be like, give me the baby. And she's like, no. Like,
she was, like, psychotic about it.
This is my baby and everything.
Baby is mine.
Yeah, so, like, I don't know if, like, it doesn't really seem like she actually went to a doctor to, like, try to help or anything.
No,
so.
she never left she shut herself in with this unhealthy baby that would not eat. Like, a part of me feels like she caused his death.
And, like, I don't know if that's part of, like, postpartum.
So there were some illusions here that made me think maybe the baby's been dead.
Right.
And she's just holding him like that. And I kind of think that might be the case because there is a part where she says she goes to the bathroom, turns on the faucet. So I thought she was about to drown the baby.
Yeah, I thought she was going to drown him.
Like postpartum depression, a lot of mothers with extreme postpartum depression have done that.
Yeah.
And then it just shows, it cuts to her like in the nursery rocking the baby. Mm-hmm. But she says he closes his eyes and he goes to sleep.
And she notices that his feet are blue. And then it goes to this next section where she's left that bathroom after noticing his blue feet. Mm-hmm. And she's rocking him. I feel like this is either a case of like SIDS or she straight up smothered him unintentionally. I don't know.
So, yeah, that's what Benjamin thinks.
It doesn't say. Yeah, it says Benjamin asked her, like, what happened? And she says, I don't know. like, I was rocking him in the nursery and his eyes closed. And then he just, like, didn't wake up. And then that next part says, Benjamin tells me that I killed the baby.
Mhm.
I fell asleep in the rocking chair and pulled the baby too close. And it's like he was pressed against my milk-stained breast, so kind of like she was trying to get him to eat and everything, but just like in her state of like, oh my gosh, I'm like so tired and everything, because she's doing it all herself. Ben's not there and everything. I'm sure she's like just delirious with like tiredness and everything. Like, from what we get in this little section, what Ben's telling her, it's kind of like she pulled him like too close, trying to get him to breathe, or trying to get him to feed, but he like couldn't breathe, like pressed up against her and everything. So like, this is like just from her diary, so it's not like we
can't really rely on it 100% because she could be an unreliable narrator.
Yeah.
All I know is that this is all very upsetting to me.
Either way, a baby is dead.
Yes.
So
in a terrible way.
Yeah.
And we kind of see like she's definitely not well. Because Benjamin's telling her he's buried in the cemetery, but she's going to his crib and she sees him wrapped in blankets. So, and this is where she tells her mom not to go to her house anymore. She sends someone to go to town if she needs to, named Anna.
Well, it says she tells her mom not to come because Ben doesn't want people around.
Ben doesn't like it.
So it's like he's very much like controlling who's around her.
Yeah, he doesn't want people around. I don't go into town.
Yeah.
So she sends Anna, and Anna says, there's a woman that went missing a few days ago, Marjorie Thomas, and that she says she was having an affair with someone up north, but we'll see. Then, there's a sad little part where Ben was going to make him a rocket. Like him and Eloise found in the woods.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. That's like, oh, he was going to make an oak rocket. Yeah, like you said, like him and Eloise used to play in this log in the woods and called it like the oak rocket, red rocket, whatever. And now he's like wanting to make his son one. So I thought that was interesting because after they like grew up, like they weren't close or anything, like once they grew up and like separated after that incident with Margaret Owens. So I thought that was kind of interesting that he wanted to kind of like build his son a rocket ship like the one that he and Eloise used to play in.
Right.
Which at the end of this chapter goes on to say, Valerie writes in her journal that Benjamin is getting suspicious of Eloise Price.
Yes.
Yeah. Trust her.
Don't trust her. Gonna go talk to her. You're coming with me, even though you look sick and skinny and your hair is short.
Before we get to that, Valerie goes on her first outing to the hardware store. And when everybody asks her why, she says it's for a rat problem. And she sees Rita at the store, and she says she's worried that Rita will tell her mom she was out and about.
Yes, this is where Rita sees her, but also at the same time, it sort of makes me feel like Valerie may have been the one to poison Benjamin because she has a rat problem.
Just thinking that.
Yeah, that didn't click for me until right now. But she has a rat problem, so she's going to go get rat poison.
You're probably right.
She's going to go get rat poison and poison Benjamin, who did die of poisoning.
Also, I know, going back on what I said last week, I said that I thought Benjamin had a hand in getting rid of the women who were disappearing.
Yeah.
Well, I might have been wrong, considering what we find out later. So,
yeah,
I retract that statement.
Retracting your statement.
I don't think Ben is a murderer. He's definitely a narcissistic asshole and everything.
Yeah.
But I don't think he's not killing these women.
So like you said, at the end of this journal, Ben starts talking about Eloise. And he decides he's tired of hearing the talk from the town. He's going to go confront her.
Yeah, and he wants Valerie to go with him.
And make a pie.
Make your famous lemon meringue, sweetie.
I know our baby just died, but make me a pie.
Yeah. So, all right. So we're back in the present. And we're back with Eloise. Tig and her are walking the snowy grounds of Dusty Hills. They're talking about the journal and its findings.
Which, the chapter before, she was like, oh, I got this journal. And then it cuts to, like, Valerie's point of view. I didn't realize that was her diary until this chapter.
Oh, yeah.
When it said, like, oh, it was her diary. And I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense now.
That was very confusing for you
It
then.
was. I was just like, okay, great.
What is happening?
I know. I was like, oh, great, we're getting Valerie's point of view.
Okay. So Tig says the person in the journal, so Tig's read it several times, and she's trying to find her grandmother that she knew in it. But she says the person in the journal and the grandmother she knew are very different. And Eloise says marriage and death changes people.
Mm-hmm.
But Eloise tells Tig that Valerie always wanted to be a mother, and even recalls a time she found her in the woods holding a dead fox cub, rocking it back and forth when she was 9 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And the buzzards were approaching.
Yeah, and Eloise is like, what are you doing out here?
Yeah.
She basically says no one deserves to die alone.
Mm-hmm.
And Tig's like, well, what did you do? She's like, I went home. And Eloise asks her how that portrait is going, but Tig tells us it's terrible.
Not going well.
Not going very well.
Mm-hmm.
So Eloise says after the incident with Margaret Owens, Ben never came back to see her.
Yes.
But years later, she sees him with a bunch of boys, and when he locks eyes with her, his face is just contorted in disgust. And it pisses her off because she's like, I wanted to run over there and tell him about all the times we spent together as kids.
Mm-hmm.
But she doesn't. Tig tells her that she's going to go back to Michigan for the holidays to see these Christmas lights at a funeral home with her dad.
Very, very random.
Yeah. I've never seen one at a funeral home. I've seen them at the park. You know, like, because we find out it's a drive-through Christmas light show.
Yeah, there's like an ice rink. There's like
It's really nice.
characters all set up.
But I kept thinking, like, what if somebody dies and needs a funeral? Like, it's all this stuff just
around. That's a little, yeah.
Yeah, it seems like one of those things that you just drive through and look at all the pretty lights.
Yeah, because he tunes the radio. But we're not there yet.
We'll talk about that later.
You have something to say?
Oh, I was just like, and it's weird because the funeral home's in a roundabout, so
Yeah.
that's the last thing I'll say.
Okay.
Anyways.
So
This is where Eloise mentions Ruth for the first time.
yes.
Yeah.
So they go back inside, and Eloise starts the story of Ruth. So World War II comes, and the men of Darren are being drafted. And we find out Charles couldn't because of his bad leg, but he does supply runs to Louisville and back.
Mm-hmm.
But since all the men are gone to war and there's only women in town, Eloise and Alma's services aren't needed. So Eloise decides that she's going to go work at this medical facility Charles mentioned.
Which says a lot about the men of Darren.
Right, yes, it does. It's this medical facility that is housing the overflow from Louisville's hospital, which is Dusty Hills. So Ruth comes to this facility, and she is a supervisor of nurses. Ruth is also from Chicago, and Eloise just describes her as beautiful. All the soldiers want her, and she's just fascinated by her and follows her around everywhere. Which is kind of like how it was with Alma and her in the beginning when they were doing their herbal stuff.
Yeah, Eloise talks about how, like, she like learns a lot from Ruth about like modern medicine.
Right.
And it's like she feels silly for coming to the hospital because she's just got herbs and like natural ointments and everything and
holistic medicine.
Yeah. And now it's like, oh, all of this like modern medicine that I didn't even know about.
Right. It comes in handy later.
Oh yeah.
When they start running out of their actual medicine.
Yeah, she gets to teach Ruth about natural remedies.
So Eloise does make several mentions that Ruth is very pretty. She's also a very attentive nurse and hardly rests. So she like rests for like, I think 15 minutes one time, and then she gets up and she is gone. And Eloise is right behind her, following her around like a little puppy. And then one day she decides to teach Eloise how to use these new medical instruments. And then, in return, Eloise takes Ruth to forage for willow bark, which is a natural pain reliever because they're running out of morphine in the hospital. And Eloise sees a berry bush, which reminds her of how she pranked Ben.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And she grabs some berries, and she
claims that they're pokeweed.
Yeah,
which is poisonous.
She hands them to Ruth, but Ruth has been taught by her not to take things that you don't know what they are. And she's like, well, what are they? And she says, well, they're pokeweed berries. And they will they'll make you stop breathing in like a minute. And then she just throws one back, which freaks Ruth out. She's like knocking the berries out of her hands and is like, why would you do that? And Eloise just sees the fear in Ruth's face, so she like fesses up quickly.
Starts laughing her butt off. Like, they're blackberries.
They're just blackberries. And this is kind of where she realizes life isn't what it was when she pranked Ben. Mm-hmm. Like, her and Ruth have seen so much death, and it's not funny to joke about it anymore.
Yeah, it's like, Ruth ain't laughing.
Ruth is having a hard time dealing with all this death and injury.
Yeah. So,
she doesn't have time for pranks.
After this prank, they sit and they talk about each other's lives and their pasts, and they just have this happy moment in such a dark time.
I like this little quote. It says, people do not become immune to death. They just become better at burying it.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah.
So they're having a good time together, eating the blackberries. And Ruth seems to feel like she shouldn't be feeling this happy.
Yes, that was what I was looking for.
Yeah, she doesn't feel like she should be this happy and enjoying this moment while they sit under the red oak trees, which is the callback to her wanting those red oak leaves.
Yeah, just like while everyone's like at war and dying, and like we literally have a hospital full of people like missing limbs and everything. Like they're out in the woods just having a good time. But like you need that.
You have to have a moment of respite,
Okay. So we go back to the present. Tig is with Eloise in her room when a nurse comes in, takes her vitals, and does some blood work.
Sticks her a bunch of times.
Yeah, she's caught off guard when the nurse handcuffs Eloise to do so.
Yeah.
She just forgot entirely that she's not just a patient, she's a prisoner.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just a quick little thing.
Yeah.
And then
it's like her wrists and the inner part of her elbow
they're
are like bruised just from all the times she has to get blood drawn, have handcuffs put on her, it's rubbing her body like raw, basically.
But then we go back to the past. So Ben arrives at the facility. He's there because he's bleeding internally after being shot in the abdomen. We then go to a flashback from Eloise that reveals that he actually stopped by to tell Eloise he was leaving for war.
Yes.
And she was just kind of like in her head, like, why aren't you telling me? I'm not Valerie Dunn.
Mm-hmm.
But then he kind of gives her like a warning, advises her and Alma not to be treating any more women.
Yeah. You and Alma have caused enough trouble as it is.
Yeah. And she's like, it seems like the trouble isn't going across the sea. Something like that.
Seems like the trouble will be across seas. So it's like, hope you don't die.
And she says, with all you men gone, this town might actually become something.
Yes. I like that. But yeah, I was really confused whenever he stopped by and was like, oh, I could go to war. And then he said that, and I was like, oh, okay, like, what a bitch. Just, like, the nerve of you to say this.
This boy has nerve, for sure. All right, this back to present past. Sorry, guys, this one just keeps going back from flashback to past to,
Flashback.
to flashback.
More sooner
We're
past.
back in the present past. Ben sees Eloise and asks what the heck she's doing in a hospital. And she comes up to him and is like, I'm fixing you up. And he looks horrified. And she says, don't worry, there aren't any U-berries in your treatment plan. So Ben's been there for a while. He's flirting with Ruth. And it does seem Eloise gets jealous. Because she makes a point to Ruth saying, he's engaged to Valerie Dunn.
Mm-hmm.
She even has to remind him of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which Ruth tells her she has nothing to worry about. Which is kind of like a nice little callback to that conversation with May and Tig in the spool and soap and spool shop
with
where
Jason.
she's like, he's
Mary. Like,
I don't care.
Don't worry about that.
So Eloise talks with Ben because he's eager to know what all has happened to Darren while he's been gone. We find out his dad died. And she flashes back to when a time when Ralph, his father, came and knocked on their door to tell Eloise to leave his son alone. And said that if she doesn't, he will come burn the house to the ground. Something your bastard father should have done years ago. But Alma's like, she won't play with him, don't worry. And then this grown-ass man says, you're trash, Eloise Price. And my boy doesn't go near trash. Like, dang. It's a lot of hostility coming from this man to this young lady.
But guess who shows up later?
Yeah, the next day,
Who doesn't hang out with trash?
Ben comes to her, and he's got like a part for their rocket ship, and he just acts like nothing happened, but Eloise can see his face, and he's been beaten. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
And then Ben, we're back in present past. Back in present past, Ben says he's going to be mayor and make the town something, create his trade routes, and maybe ask Ruth to come to Darren. Which Eloise is pissed and reminds him, aren't you engaged? And plus she's already been planning on asking Ruth to stay with her at Whitmore Hall. And she's made a plan to make a room for her and presents she's gonna give her and everything. So Eloise marches off saying, Ruth doesn't give a shit about you. And Ben yells back that she's just jealous, a jealous hag.
Something else that I found interesting, whenever Ben says that he's going to be mayor, Eloise specifically asks him if that's what he wants.
Yeah.
And everything. Do you really want to follow in your father's footsteps?
Right. Yeah.
And everything. And by the way of it, sounds like he is.
Yeah.
Becoming the person his father was.
Which, I mean, right now, it seems like he's kind of in a good place because he's I want to bring jobs to Darren.
Yeah.
And that's a good goal, but Eloise is worried what happens when the job is done.
Yeah.
And the rain covers up your rail, the mud.
Yeah, it's it's not gonna last very long.
Right. So we come to the end of the war. Eloise asks Ruth to join her at Whitmore Hall. But Ruth says she cannot leave her clinic in Chicago And she basically tells us it's a women's clinic that also performs abortions, so kind of like your like Planned Parenthood. And then she tells us the story of Elizabeth, who was the assistant to the doctor she works for. And there was a mob that found out she was help performing abortions with him. And she shows up dead. But they could never prove it was the mob that did it. But Ruth and everybody pretty much knows. And Eloise makes this point and says, did they go after the doctor? And Ruth's like, no, of course not. He's a man.
Mm-hmm.
She says, Elizabeth's crime was not only that she was performing terminations, albeit illegally, but also that she was a woman.
Mm-hmm.
So double standard sticker. Yeah. So Ruth turns her down, and Eloise returns to Whitmore Hall alone, and she is miserable.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she's not even really talking to Alma. She just does not care. During this time, we find out Ben got married, and he starts the process of building the railway. And then Ruth shows up. And then we are back in the present with Tig. And this part is kind of sad as well.
Yeah.
All of it's sad.
We're back in the present with Tig and her dad, who are doing this weird drive-through Christmas light show at a funeral home.
Woo!
But the day before, when she arrived home, she is like missing Darren. She feels like she's made a home kind of there.
Yeah.
And she like brings up like May says this weird little quote about chicken. A cooked bird is better. And her dad just like, and just kind of like brushes it off.
Yeah, he doesn't seem interested in her time there, like, at all.
Right. So, this presents a great opportunity, and Tig capitalizes on it because her dad is stuck in a car during this Christmas light show. And she's going to ask all her questions. So, she kind of sees this as like a tunnel of opportunity. So, like, she's going to mention everything she wants to mention to him in the short time that they do this drive through the Christmas light show. So Tig mentions to her dad that she met Rita, and she wants to know if he knew that his mom had a sister, which nobody ever told him. But he said when he was young, he found an old photo of her hugging someone in the river that resembles her. So he just assumed that there was a sister. Valerie was very quiet and didn't want to talk about Benjamin. So when her dad would mention him, she just looked hurt and wouldn't say anything about it. Mm-hmm. And there became a point when, as Tig's dad grew older, Valerie couldn't even bear to look at him. And so they just carried on in silence. So Tig's dad does say she believes Valerie was running away from Benjamin. And Tig is like, but why? Because he was dead. And he says, I feel like she was still in danger in some way. So, and then Tig is like, if that place was dangerous, why did you let me go? And he's just like, no, like, it's dangerous to her. And, she always wanted to go back home, but that place held so many painful memories, she could never bring herself to go. Mm-hmm. And so, therefore, he never went either. So they're going through the Christmas lights. Tig reveals that she's been talking to Eloise. Yeah. And he's like, the lady that murdered my dad. And he's like, yeah. But she's been very helpful. And and she's like, she was actually a midwife. Like, she wasn't this terrible person. And he says that was a very courageous, like, occupation. Mm-hmm. So that's what gets Tig emotional. She says the thoughts of the midwives being so courageous and helping these women. So she starts thinking about that alley in Chicago and how alone she felt. Mm-hmm. And this is where we go back to that mention of the nursery rhyme from episode 1.
I made a note.
Yes.
I was like, okay, this is where we get
There's a painting of a cow jumping over the moon in the alley. So that's where that comes from. So Tig's dad asks if that is why Eloise killed his dad, because Benjamin found out what she was doing up at Whitmore Hall. And she admits she doesn't know. So they're about to get through the lights. They see a little cardboard cutout saying, "Bye, come again." And she's realizing her opportunity to spill everything she wants to spill to her dad is running out. So they get through the lights, and Tig just spills everything. She tells her dad what happened in Chicago. So we find out she went to a bar, met this man who took her to the alley, and she just says she didn't have a chance to say no.
Right.
And then it cuts to her saying that she went to a support group for rape victims. And I'm actually going to quote this entire paragraph because it's so telling and important. So, the first week I was back in Ann Arbor, I went to a support group for women who had been raped. I went into the room expecting it to be a collection of teenage girls and young college-age women with thin faces, flat stomachs, and rounded breasts. And some of them were, but others were large women, older women, women with stretch lines on their stomachs and deep laugh lines creasing their skin. One had been raped by her uncle, one by her coach, a handful by brothers and friends. One woman had been raped repeatedly by her husband, who then drove her to the emergency room when she wouldn't stop bleeding. I made it to the stairs just outside the door before I vomited. Mm-hmm. So she goes into this thinking, rape victims are these conventionally beautiful young women, but it just goes to show you it happens to everyone. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter your age.
Yeah.
It happens.
Yeah.
So Tig's dad comforts her, of course.
Which I thought in the beginning, I thought that he knew what had happened. So whenever it was like he was surprised whenever he told her, I was just like,
you were surprised.
I was surprised. Because for some reason, I thought he already knew why she had left and everything.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's understandable why she wouldn't tell him, because
maybe she said she got assaulted or harassed or something, but didn't mention
specifically what happened. Yeah. But it's it's hard to talk about if something like that happens to you. But
yeah. So of course he comforts her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought it was cute.
He asks if they want to go again.
He holds her hand and says he's glad she came home and everything.
Yeah, it was sweet. And then, she asks, "Do you want to go around again?"
Yeah.
Because I think he's like, you weren't paying attention to the lights at all. So they go around again. And then the last chapter, Tig goes back to Darren after the holiday. Jason's there to pick her up with his 9-year-old daughter, Lily.
Which I love Lily.
She's cute. And I love the part because they're getting in the truck, which is just a 2-seater with the console in the middle.
Uh-huh.
And she's like, "What are we going to do? There's a kid here." Lily just looks at her, crawls up on the console. And Jason is having her change gears.
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to do that for my dad.
It's a very country thing to do. Your kids know how to drive very young.
Dad had me shift gears while he was driving his truck back in the day.
Yeah, I was definitely younger than 13 when my dad took me out to the...
Well, he would be driving and just have me shift the gears for him.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I wasn't very good at student, so no, we didn't do that. And then they pass Whitmore Hall, and both Tig and Lily agree that it looks beautiful with all the icicles hanging on it.
Whitmore does look haunted, though.
Yeah, Lily's like, "That place don't scare me. I think it's beautiful." And I'm like, "Oh, I love you."
Yeah, she's cute. So later, Tig visits Eloise. who is very happy to see her. And she sees that she's got all her leaves out. And she's like, what are we doing with these? And she's like, I'm decorating. So I think, what are they doing? Like almost wallpapering them to the wall?
Yeah,
They're
like
sticking them everywhere.
Yeah, they're like gluing them to the wall. And
Classic Crayola glue stick.
yeah, I think Tig is like, do they care? And she's like, no, honey, they don't care what we do.
Yeah.
This ain't prison.
This ain't prison.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the windows, the walls, the ceiling.
Yeah.
Everything.
She's making a forest in her room.
Mm-hmm. So while they're doing this, she says, we are at a turning point, Miss Costello. So we're back in our story.
Things changed after the war.
Ruth is with Alma and Eloise at the hall, which they know is risky because they do say with the herbs they can explain that away, but she has actual medical equipment.
Yeah.
You can't know that she's actually an abortion physician.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Because of what happened with that lady. I forgot her name.
The one that was murdered.
Elizabeth. Yeah.
The murdered lady.
Oh, I also like whenever Ruth first shows up, Alma didn't like her.
Yeah.
Because she went into the cellar
It was
and
throwing out her herbs that don't do anything.
Yeah. But then she started to she saw all of Ruth's medical equipment and stuff.
She's curious.
Asking questions
Mhm.
more. Yeah, they say now all of them are in danger if anyone finds out what they're actually doing.
Yes. There's a brief mention that during this time the railroad is giving men work. Which was a job that wasn't as dangerous as working in a mine or something like that. So things were good in town for a while. At least they seem to be, she says. But things are rarely what they seem. So, of course, we know the tracks didn't start working right until after Benjamin dies.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this nice little quote from Tig. It isn't until just now that I realized Benjamin's Braun's back is to the rails. He won't ever have to look at them again. His disappointment. So, yes, there's this quote. All of us living up at Whitmore Halls knew that there was never a day when we weren't in danger. Perhaps never more so than on the night that Marjorie Thomas came up the hill. And Tig goes, isn't that one of the women that went missing? Mm-hmm. And Eloise says, well, that's one side of the story. Mm-hmm. So we find out the other side of the story.
Guys, she wasn't murdered.
She wasn't murdered.
Well, what happened... I mean, yeah, she's not dead, but it's still not great.
No.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so we find out Marjorie is married to a quiet but violent man named Christopher Thomas. Mm-hmm. And Eloise is actually not surprised to see her, as she has been there to visit many times. But this time is different. She's pregnant.
Marjorie Thomas did come up to Whitmore Hall in the middle of the night,
and
seeking help.
She is worried her husband is going to kill her.
Oh no, she knows that he's going to kill her. Yeah.
She reveals to them that she's been badly burned. She shows a burn spot on her neck, and while they're trying to scramble and get the aloe to solve that, she starts unbuttoning her dress, and it's down her chest and to her stomach.
Yeah.
And they're having to clean it before they can actually put the aloe on it.
Yes. So
they're having to scrape
she tells us what happened. He came home angry, and she was in the kitchen making tea for a friend of hers. Somebody died, apparently.
Yeah, a parent of one of her friends had died 2 days prior, so she was going to make some tea, go and support them.
Yeah. So she's boiling the kettle. He comes home.
He calls her a whore.
Slamming doors. He calls her a whore, and he grabs her by the hair, strips her down, and takes the boiling hot water and pours it on her. Which she says, it's so hot, it just feels like ice.
Yeah.
Beats her, throws her outside in the snow, and she just lays there until he leaves.
Mm-hmm. So, Eloise and Ruth are out in the hall, and Ruth is like, well, what can we do? She doesn't want to terminate. Mm-hmm. And Eloise is like, but we have to help her. We have to.
Also, we find out that she's pregnant, but it's a different man's baby.
So she was having an affair.
So she was having an affair, but yeah, she doesn't want
Oh,
to terminate the pregnancy.
dang, I think I missed that part then.
Yeah, no, she does admit that it's not his. My husband's going to kill me, and this isn't his baby.
Yeah.
Okay, so she's having an affair. Doesn't give you an excuse to treat someone like that.
Yeah.
But Eloise says we gotta come up with a plan, and they ultimately decide they're gonna send her to Chicago because Ruth knows someone that runs a home for victims of domestic violence.
Mhm.
So they did. The next day, they put her on a train, gave her some money and some medicine, and they sent her on her way.
They gave her $50, which felt like too little and too much all at the same time, and they sat there for 4 hours waiting on the train, thinking Christopher was going to show up at any moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, back in the present, Tig mentions that she passed by Whitmore Halls. It was beautiful, and Eloise just lights up. She's like, well, did you get to go? And she says, no, because the road has been blocked off. Eloise says, that doesn't matter. That doesn't mean you can't go.
You can walk it just like all those women did.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so Tig decides she's going to Whitmore Hall. And that's where the chapters end.
I will go to the house where my grandfather was killed.
Yep. That is where we are at. Which, again, I still kind of think Valerie may have done it.
Yeah, now I'm
With
thinking
the rat poison?
that Valerie, because yeah, like I said last week and everything, it was a little bit odd when Eloise just comes out and she's just like, yeah, I did it.
Yeah.
And everything. I killed him.
Mhm.
So
So it
yeah,
seems
and
like a very Eloise thing to take the blame.
yeah.
And
The hell
I feel like the author wants us to think it's her because she does poison him at the beginning of the book. And she knows all these
She poisons
remedies and
him.
everything.
Like people are suspicious of them and everything, of performing these abortions.
She's
and
very
everything.
skilled with herbs and medicines, and she knows what is poisonous. So you automatically assume that it's her. But I'm leaning to believe that it's Valerie.
Yeah, I'm starting to think that maybe she did it because Ben was abusive. Like all of these other husbands seem to be. I think all of the other women that go missing are just all of these women who have come to them to be like, hey, I'm in an abusive situation. I need to get out. So they help them by sending them to Chicago. And then people just think they're missing
Yeah.
and everything. But yeah, I'm starting to think that Valerie ended up killing him because he's an asshole.
Yeah, and also Valerie just happened to disappear the moment he dies.
Yes. Yeah.
Runs to
She
Chicago.
just leaves. Yeah, she just leaves.
Yeah.
Without telling everyone.
It's also kind of
really.
crazy she's pregnant, though.
And she's pregnant.
Because it seems like they don't interact. Like, at
Well,
all.
her and Ben.
Yeah, like,
Like,
once that baby
Who has
died.
the time? I'm off.
He wished
drinking
she
with
was
other
dead.
women. Yeah.
Like, I don't think...
Oh yeah, I forgot that. He literally says that he wishes she was dead.
Yeah.
So, whew.
There's a lot of ways that this can go.
If anybody has a baby that dies, please don't turn on your spell.
Yeah.
Please. Like, I know depression is bad, but oof. In that situation, both of y'all are hurting and
Y'all need to come together. And
y'all need to come
apart.
together.
I do
Yeah,
think
not much.
Valerie, in that time, needed help, but she was never going to get it.
Mhm.
You know, the time that it was, the place where she was at, she was never going to get the mental health that she needed. And
Yeah.
I do think something was wrong with her. Whether she killed the baby or not, I don't know.
Mhm.
I'm sort of leaning towards she did suffer psychosis and accidentally killed her son.
Maybe.
But we don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it could have just been an accident. I mean,
It could have just happened.
what's that?
SIDS.
Syndrome. Yeah.
Sudden infant death
Sudden
syndrome.
infant death syndrome.
It
It's a
happens.
thing. She could have accidentally smothered him, just not knowing. We don't know.
Sorry. I went back to the very beginning, the prologue.
Yeah.
So at the beginning, where I think I said last episode, he's sitting at a table drinking tea,
Uh huh.
But he's also eating lemon meringue pie.
Oh.
So did she poison the lemon meringue?
So it says the tea was poisoned, but if this is Eloise, like, she would say they're poisoned, and not the lemon meringue pie.
Yeah.
Ooh. Could be the
So-
pie.
So there was a pie and some tea, and we don't know. Or it could be something totally different.
She just Valerie just goes up to Eloise and Alma's like, "Hey, don't eat the pie."
Tune into next episode.
Don't eat the pie.
Yeah, I hope we figure out next episode.
All right, on to the next.
Well, what chapters are we reading for next week?
We're gonna read chapters 19 through 25.
Yes. Through 25.
That's good.
Through 25.
Through 25.
19 through 25.
Sounds good.
Stopping at 26.
Don't read 20.
Do not read 26.
Stop at 26.
Big stop.
All right. I'm gonna do literary news or your story.
Which one do y'all want?
I think let's start with the story.
Okay.
Story time.
Story time.
Tell me about how you came up with the story.
Okay, so
Tell us the story of this story.
I'm gonna read y'all this story that I created back in 2017. So it's been a hot minute since I told it. It literally came out of a night where Andria and I went to Cheddar's at around, like, I don't know, it was super late at night and everything. This is our college days and everything. We were so tired working on papers, and we were just like, hey, we just ran to the Cheddar's that was down the street from our apartment and everything. And for some reason, I just started, like, I think Andria asked me for a story,
And I recorded it.
and she recorded this story that I literally came up with off the top of my head. So she sent me the video recording the other day, and I transcribed everything that I said. So I had to add a little bit just because she didn't start recording until I was like a minute or two in. So I had to kind of like create a beginning of the story. But this is literally transcribed exactly how I told it.
Yay!
So some of it may not make any sense. Because this is literally like I'm coming up with this like off the top of my head
On the spot.
on the spot at a Cheddar's in 2017.
in public.
In public. Yes. So, I give to you all the tale of Fernie the Fairy and Hawk, which I think is just a ripoff of Fern Gully, but who's to say? All right.
I can't say.
Hayden can't say. Okay. Once there was a fairy named Fernie. His mission in life was to be the greatest fairy of all time and help save all the animals of the Smoky Mountains, which was where he resided. One day, while out and about, Fernie came across a horrifying scene. There was a giant hawk who was chasing this small little field mouse, trying to eat 'em all up. Now, Fernie didn't like bullies, so he goes up to the hawk and says, "Now see here, I am Fernie the Fairy, savior of the animals of the Smoky Mountains. How dare you pick on the smaller animals of the forest? They have done nothing to harm you." Hawk then saw the error of his ways and goes, "Oh dear sir, you are right. I am a bad egg. Because I have wronged so many animals in my time, I would like to come with you and start saving more animals of the Smoky Mountains." So Fernie goes, "I don't know if you're up to it." And Hawk goes, "Oh sir, I am. Just let me prove myself to you." Fernie goes, "All right, if you could prove yourself to me, you may accompany me as I save the animals of the Smoky Mountains."
Oh, I just remembered there's mention of berries
Yeah.
next to the story.
Yeah, there is mention of berries. So they start on their journey together. Our duo. This part doesn't make any sense because I say 2 animals and a fairy just going around the Smoky Mountains. One with a magical stick and the other with his fierce talons. So they're going through the Smoky Mountains. They're both flying because, Fernie can fly too. And Fernie goes and turns to Hawk and he goes, Hawk, did you hear that? Because Hawk doesn't have a name. He's just a bird and birds don't really have names. He goes, Hawk, did you hear that? And Hawk says, yes, I'm a hawk. I have very good hearing. So they race towards the noise, and what they come across was utterly, utterly horrifying. It was a bear. Just a bear. She was standing underneath a tree. So Fernie and Hawk went up to her, and they were just like, Madam, what is wrong? And the bear goes, my child is up in the tree and can't get down. And so Fernie the fairy, no, the bear talks first. I told you this is transcribed exactly how I said.
Actually said that.
Yes. No, the bear talks. She's like, can you go save my child? And Fernie the fairy turns to her and says, we're not firefighters, ma'am. It's not like saving cats from trees. We're not saving bears either. So the bear goes, wow, you're really a jerk. And Hawk goes, it's okay, I can get him. But Hawk doesn't do much. He just flies up there and kind of pushes him off. Pushes the cub down, and his mother catches him in her arms. And she storms off with a lurch towards Fernie and Hawk, and she's like, wow, what good you two have done here. Then Fernie turns to Hawk and he proclaims, all in a day's work, saving the animals from the Smoky Mountains. Because that's what we do, Hawk. We save the animals of the Smoky Mountains. And Hawk goes, yes, we do. But then Fernie turns towards Hawk and goes, I really did want to save that bear cub, but I just wanted to test you. You remember last time I said I was going to test you to make sure you were worthy of being with me? This was your test. I actually paid that mother to put her child in the tree. And Hawk, I was very pleased with how you handled that. Very well pleased. I would have done the same thing. I would have pushed that child out of the tree. So Hawk goes, so then you mean it. I am worthy of accompanying you through the Smoky Mountains. Yes, Hawk, you are worthy. And so we see our hero soaring into the sunset. Another deed well done for the day, saving the animals of the Smoky Mountains. And then Andria asks if that was all. So I go, the next day. Since you insisted I keep going.
Also, I remember being like, Smoky Mountains after everything you said. Saving the animals, and it's like, the Smoky Mountains.
Saving the animals of the Smoky Mountains, yes. The next day, Fernie was out alone hunting for some nourishment. So he Sorry, I have to burp. But that sound of the burp was Fernie. I literally had to burp right there. His stomach was growling, and he goes, oh my goodness, I am so hungry. I need to find some nourishment and take it back to Hawk, who's guarding our home, because they live together now since they're a duo. So he goes hunting around the bushes and the trees and the flowers and the bees. I had that in there. I think I was trying to make it rhyme. And he finds some berries. They're blackberries. And he gathers them. And then in the bushes, some of the berries don't look right. And he goes, oh no, what is that? He hears some rustling in the bushes. Shh. And he's like, oh, who's there? And he hears a whimper in the bushes, and he goes to investigate, and there's a small mammal. Or is it a bird? A small bird who is lying on the ground, feebly flapping his wings. And Fernie goes over to him and is like, oh my gosh, what happened? The bird didn't make any sounds. It just laid still. The bird was dead. How's that for drama? Then Fernie was just like, oh my goodness, what happened to this bird? He was looking over him. Neither of his wings were broken, but he seems to be all right. But then Fernie saw the little juice from the berry coming from the bird's mouth. The berries were poisonous. Why were they poisonous? Fernie gonna find out. So he uses his magical fairy stick and barricades, puts a barricade around the bushes. He goes, no one's getting into these bushes. No one's going to die today. Except for the bird that's already dead. No one else. He goes to find Hawk and he says, Hawk, we have another mission. One of the bushes is poisonous. We need to figure out what's causing it. So Hawk and him go. So they go to the bush and gather up some of the berries and they take it to the science Dr. Fairy, whose name is Doc, obviously. You can't have a Dr. Fairy not named Doc. So they go to Doc, give him the berries, and Doc does some experiments on them. And Fernie and Hawk just sit there staring while he does the experiments. And after he's done, he takes off his glasses. Fernie goes, Doc, what's wrong with the berries? Doc looks at him and he says, I don't know, but they're definitely poisonous. I think there may be some crazy human technology that's making these berries poisonous. Then Fernie goes, yes, you're probably right. Those darn humans are always messing up everything. All right, Hawk, we need to go fight someone. Fight the first person we see because they obviously caused this. So Fernie and Hawk go off looking for humans to figure out what the heck is going on with their berries. And while they're going, they just see more and more animals dropping to the ground. And they're like, oh no, the poison is spreading everywhere. What is happening? What is happening? It's madness. The berries are poisonous. So they go to this. They're flying. And they see this big building. So they're just like, oh, that's one of the places where humans reside. So they go creeping around, trying to listen in on what the humans were saying, trying to figure out what's wrong. And the humans, they're just like, I thought of a great idea. Who needs the environment anymore? Let's just poison everything. All the animals, all the plants, we can sustain ourselves. And these were two very drunk men who had decided they were going to poison the environment. And they were actually doing a good job at it. So Fernie and Hawk swoop down and confront these two men and are like, what did you put on our plants? All the animals are dying. And the two men go, yes, our plan is working. We will never tell you what we put on your bushes, on your berry bushes. So Fernie turns to Hawk and he says, do these two. I'm going to try to figure out what they used on the bushes. So Hawk goes and attacks them and uses his fierce talons and scratches at them, pecks their eyes out, and there's lots of screaming from the two men. It's pretty epic, actually, if you think about it. So then, while the fighting is going on, Fernie is rummaging through the closets and comes across this bottle that has a skull and crossbones on it. And he goes, oh my gosh, that is the human symbol for death. This must be what they put on our bushes. So he grabs it and calls to Hawk, all right, stop killing those guys. We gotta take this stuff back to Doc. So they go and take it to Doc and they're like, hey Doc, this is what they use for the plants that are killing everyone. So can you make an antidote of it? And Doc says, I will try my best. So he starts working on the antidote, and Fernie and Huck just want to sit there. But it's just like, we have to try and find all the plants that were poisonous because they have a particular tint to them. The berries, they have a particular tint to them to show they are poisonous. So they go, and they're barricading all of them, all the bushes, like, no one eat the bushes. I mean, the berries. Sorry, who eats bushes? So they go, animal down, animal down. The animals are down everywhere and they're dying. So they end up barricading all the bushes. So, okay, I think we're safe now. And they race back to Doc. And, like, these bushes are their only food source. So, like, without them, they can't eat. And they'll all end up dying. So they go back to Doc and are like, Doc, did you come up with an antidote? And Doc goes, I think so. But I don't know if it'll actually work unless we try it out on a bush. So Fernie and Huck take the antidote, take it to one of the bushes, and Fernie pours it over the bush and on the roots so it can soak up and actually get into the plants. You know how plants work. So they wait a little bit for the plants to soak up the antidote, and Huck goes, Fernie, do you think the plant is safe to eat? Fernie goes, I don't know, but we have to try it out. I will eat a berry and see what happens. Huck goes, no, Fernie, you are too... The woods need you. You can't eat a berry. You might die. The woods need you to save the animals of the Smoky Mountains. So Fernie says, it is in the line of duty that I must do this. Don't try to eat one before me, Hawk, because if you eat one, then I will just eat one, and then we will both have died. So Hawk goes, okay, I won't sacrifice myself for you. And Fernie goes, thank you. He takes one, pops it into his mouth, eats it, and he stands there for a few minutes, and Hawk goes, how are you feeling, Fernie? And Fernie goes, I think I'll survive. So then Fernie doesn't die. Everything is fine. And then Andria goes, what the heck was that? So I go, what do you want me to do? Then Fernie died, and they didn't find an antidote, and all the plants died, all the animals died, and then humanity died. You're right, that's a better ending.
Humanity?
And then aliens came and took over the planet again. So that was my story.
Snaps.
And in our second book that we were going to do, we had the aliens coming and turning Fernie and Hawk into zombies.
What?
And we had zombie plants and animals, and the duo was back in business, just like trying to figure out how to get them changed back into normal. So y'all let me know if you want a sequel. We gotta go to Cheddar's. It's just gotta come from the brain after a night of sleep deprivation. So that was the tale of Fernie the Fairy and Hawk.
That part when you said you had to burp, you actually did that.
Yeah, I told you, I transcribed it exactly how I said it. I had to burp while I was telling the story, and I said, sorry, I have to burp. And then I used that to be the growling of his stomach.
Wow.
Genius.
What a
right?
tale.
I know.
We don't have it written down, but I had a tail because I did a turn, and my tail was about Frosty the Snowman.
I wish.
And it was creepy.
It was awesome. I wish I had recorded that. You had the bright idea of recording mine. I wish I had done the same.
It was
yours.
creepy.
Yeah.
It was like he was after someone, and then she was like hiding away from him, and he just melts underneath the door frame and slides
in her room. Yes.
Yeah, it was creepy. And then there was one where someone was getting married, and the snowman stole.
What?
Yeah, I remember that
I
one.
remember that.
And they were snowboarding. Man, I can't believe I didn't write that one down. Yeah. I'll just say real quick. I had a dream.
Yeah.
It's very short.
Okay.
because I don't remember what else happened. I dreamt that my father was B.D. Wong.
Was what?
B.D. Wong?
B.D. Wong.
What? No.
I don't even know who that is.
You didn't tell me this.
Law and Order SVU.
Oh.
You didn't
Therapist.
tell me this dream.
No, I was gonna save it for tonight. So, had a dream that my dad was B.D. Wong.
Oh, yeah. That's awesome. Great start.
Oh my god.
And the grasshoppers
What about grasshoppers?
were sent by the government. It's run by Elon Musk.
What? This is a great dream. Oh my god.
And I've gone into hiding because the grasshoppers are looking for me. Because they're
The
trying.
Elon Musk government-funded grasshoppers.
I've gone into hiding because my dad. They're trying to blackmail my dad. But it's like, I have your daughter. Give me all the answers I need.
All your secrets.
All your secrets. And all I remember is I find a hiding spot and I'm like, this is a really good hiding spot. No one will find me. And then 3 girls come in and they get in the same place. And so I'm like, what are you guys doing here? And they're like, we're hiding. They're killing everybody that's not B.D. Wong's daughter.
The grasshoppers?
Grasshoppers are
Everyone that's in their way.
Oh
This
my
is like
God.
important secrets that Elon needs to know.
Oh man.
So I'm like, okay, you can stay, just be quiet. And they're just talking about like, so yesterday.
They're talking.
Shut up.
Oh my god.
Shut up. And that's it.
And then you wake up.
Oh my god.
Wow.
Oh my god.
The grasshoppers got me.
You like
Oh
your
my God.
robot grasshoppers, like
Robot grasshoppers.
Terminators.
Oh my gosh. That's even better. Oh
I
god.
wish I could remember my dreams.
Well, there was more to this one, but I don't remember it.
Try to start lucid dreaming.
I'll try. Do we have any literary news?
So, did y'all read anything else for this week?
I did not.
No? Okay. So, what I read for this week was gonna be also a literary news update. So, I told y'all last week about this new Bram Stoker piece that they just found and published after 134 years called Gibbet Hill. I did look
It's
up the
Gibbet.
I looked up the pronunciation, and it's a Gibbet Hill.
Okay.
So I ended up reading that for this week. And I need to correct myself on what I said from last week, since I have a little more information about it. So from the BBC article that I read, I thought the book was about this sailor who had been murdered by 3 criminals and that their bodies were like strung up as a warning to passersby. That's kind of like all it said and everything. But that's not what the book is about at all.
Oh.
So those events that I just mentioned was an actual crime that happened in 1786, where these 3 sailors murdered another sailor on Hindhead Hill, which was later named Gibbet Hill after this event because the perpetrators were hanged on a gibbet.
Oh.
And it's like a hangman's gallows, but then instead of like burying the bodies, you like leave them to rot and everything. Like sometimes,
Yeah.
you know, like in like the iron cages sometimes.
Oh, cool. Creepy.
So that's what a gibbet is.
The
and
iron
everything.
cage is a gibbet?
Hmm?
Sort of?
Like basically, it's just like it's like the
gallows.
it's like the stand where like you hang a person, and then yeah, like basically like a gibbet is just like you just like leave the bodies to rot instead of actually like taking them away and like burying them
Right.
and everything. So
Makes me think of Pirates of the Caribbean.
exactly.
I know.
Yeah, that first scene.
Yeah.
So those events marked this particular location now as a place of superstition within the eyes of the public. And Bram Stoker wasn't the only one who referenced this place in their works, but like a lot of authors did this. Charles Dickens mentions the event in his work Nicholas Nickleby, like along with other authors, just using this event and this spot to draw upon this like dark and superstitious atmosphere that the place had now. So the actual story of Bram Stoker's Gibbet Hill is very different. So it involves, and like I'm not gonna talk a lot about it, but I'm like gonna highlight the main points and everything. So it involves these 3 creepy children.
Oh.
2 of them are described as being Indian, and then the other is, I guess, just white because he has blonde hair and blue eyes.
Okay.
And they meet the narrator while on this hill, and he says it feels like they have a fascination with murder because they're talking about like those events and everything, and they're like, let's go up to like the memorial and everything because there's like a memorial like on the hill and everything. And he eventually like loses sight of them. So later on, he sees them in this glade, and they're performing this ritual with a snake, but they're talking in like a foreign language because it says they're Indian and everything. So he doesn't know what they're saying, but he says by the way they were talking, it seemed to suggest murder. So he continues his stroll, and it's getting later, and he talks about how beautiful the nature is. So he sits down at one of the memorial crosses that are on the site that commemorates the murder, and he is attacked. And his hands are tied behind his back, and the scarf is like tied around his head, so he's like pinned to the stone, and he thinks he's getting robbed. But he sees the 3 kids from earlier, and they're looking at him with these like mischievous eyes and everything. And one of the girls pulls out a dagger and starts teasing him like she's going to stab him.
Oh, gosh.
But then the narrator faints. And he's woken up to this young couple that he had seen earlier in the day. And they're shaking him awake, asking if he's all right. And he asks them if they saw 3 children. And they go, yeah, they were going down the road. And they seem like the happiest children. And the narrator starts crying out like, oh, my heart, my heart. He's like clutching his chest. And the last lines we get are, he stood back and she clung frightened to his arm as a large blind worm, which is a snake, wriggled itself out from my bosom, fell on the ground, and glided away down the hillside into the copse below. So I was like,
What?
Alien before Alien came out, basically. But it was a pretty good story. I did have a few questions, like, why are there specifically Indian children in, like, such an English setting?
I was going to say, where's Bram Stoker from? He's English, right?
It's, like, Ireland.
Yeah,
It's,
okay,
like,
why are
where
there...
It is in Ireland.
Well,
Yeah. It's, like,
how do they
where-
describe them? What's the actual, like, words used?
Oh, like, literally, like, Indian, basically.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like, actual, like, Native American as we would see them?
No, not Native American, but, like, from India.
From India?
Yeah.
Okay, because my first thought was Native American.
No, like,
Actual, like,
I know.
kids from India.
Yes, kids from India.
Okay.
Because,
Gotcha.
yeah, like, the way that they're dressed and everything
Okay,
suggests, like, from, like, the Middle East and everything.
gotcha.
That
Okay,
makes
so
more
more
sense.
so that part of India.
I would have said Native American, Hayden.
Would you?
Yes.
I don't know.
That's the more correct
Mhm.
term, I think.
Mm.
But anyways, it's like, why are there specifically like Indian, Middle East children in like such an English setting?
Mhm.
What's their connection to this site? Why do they want to attack a complete stranger? Like, why did they just tease him like they were gonna stab him, but then don't? And then it says, like, the snake comes from his chest, so I'm assuming it actually, like, comes out, like of his body, and then he dies.
It doesn't just slither up and
Yeah, like, but it doesn't like specify that he like died afterwards. But like, you know, like other than that, like it's a like good spooky story.
maybe
obviously.
that's why he didn't want it to be found. He was like, he had a friend review it and they were asking the same questions, like, so is he dead? Did the snake kill him?
It was just published in like a newspaper, and then he like wrote Dracula like afterwards and everything.
Right.
But
Penny saver.
and obviously there's like more to it. But you can get the story on Amazon Kindle for like literally $1. I went ahead and bought the $10 version, and it came with all of the extra info. Like whenever, because like if I hadn't like read the history of Gibbet Hill like after reading the story, I wouldn't have known. Honestly.
Also, I wouldn't be surprised that there's children from India, because I mean Britain had control
Yeah,
Right.
in parts of India from
Yeah.
from like the 1750s.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, so I went ahead and bought like a more expensive version because it just had like a lot of stuff about like the history of Gibbet Hill, like stuff that I talked about earlier, like a lot of people using it in literature. It talked about like Bram Stoker and like him writing Dracula. They had like a lot of like someone like did some like actual like pictures to go with the story, and like those are in there. Just a lot of cool things. And all the proceeds from the story, if you buy it, go to the Charlotte Stoker Fund. It's administered by the Rotunda Foundation in Dublin. It's named after Bram Stoker's mother, who is an advocate for the deaf. So the fund goes towards research on the prevention of acquired deafness in babies, and also research on cochlear implants. So yeah, if you want to actually like read the story, I think it's only like 20 pages.
Oh wow!
Like
The short
literally, it's super short and everything. So, like I said, like it's only $1. Like if you buy the Kindle version, print copies like range in price, but you can go support a good cause. You can buy it on Amazon or through the Rotunda Foundation website itself. And also if you like just want to donate like money to their website to support like research into like deafness of babies and everything, you can go to the rotundafoundation.ie/donation to make a monetary donation.
Sounds like a good cause.
Yeah.
So really quickly, I want to mention me and my journey with the education Little Tree. So, of course, last week I read a couple chapters. I've been finding it really hard to want to read this book. I think I'll enjoy it once I get through it, but I think I'm actually going to put it on the back burner. There's another book that I want to read more, and it's one that I have called The 5 People You Meet in Heaven.
Okay, I've heard of that.
And I think that I'm going to put The Education of Little Tree on the back burner and read that one, because I'm wanting to read that one. It's all I can think about, so I'm going to switch over to that.
That's by
That guy
Mitch
that's waiting for you to
Albom.
talk about it. Heart just broke.
Listen, it's coming, but, just listen to the episodes and it will happen. Just not next week.
Just gotta keep listening.
And honestly, the book is relatively short, so I think I'll be able to get through it quickly. Maybe within the week.
That's by like Mitch Albom,
I think so, yeah.
I think. Because I know I've definitely heard of it. I've never read any of his stuff, but I've definitely seen it and everything.
Yeah.
So
I think I'm going to be reading that next week. I really want to read it. I've been holding off because I'm supposed to be reading The Education of Little Tree, but...
Boy, you read what you want.
See, that's how I feel. So I'm going to read that. And I honestly think I'll be able to get through the entire book all next week. So next week, we should have an update on that.
On the new
Sounds good.
Okay.
Anything else before we end the episode?
No, but as usual, if you would like to submit your story to us for us to read on our podcast, you can do that by sending it to us at onelitpod@gmail.com, onelitpod@gmail.com. And you can follow us on Instagram and TikTok at OneLitPod. And this podcast is posted to YouTube and Spotify.
Yes, and these are the authors and people who just feel like they want to write a story just for fun. We will check it out and read it.
Yeah, it doesn't even have to be a story.
Any sort of writing that you have.
Yeah, or if you have a book that's about to be like released and published, you want us to talk about it, like we did that a few episodes back, we're happy to do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Be like Rosemary.
Yeah.
Come to us. We will tell everyone about your book. Be like me and Andria. Submit your crazy ass dreams.
Yeah.
We
We
would
will
love to
read
hear
it
your
on
dreams.
We
here.
got some funny dreams.
Yeah, we really want other people to submit any kind of writings that they have. That would really make me happy if people did that.
I'm a person who loves memoirs, so if you have a little story about yourself, I'd be happy to read it. Anything else?
I guess that's it. Read your chapters.
Read your
Read your
chapters.
chapters.
All right, we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.